Should the King stand up to Donald Trump for threatening to annex Canada? Canada is, of course, a Commonwealth nation. And the head of Alberta, the country's richest province, says the King has got a duty to confront the president. Mr. Trump has repeatedly threatened to absorb Canada, saying it should become the 51st US state. The head of Alberta says this is a direct confrontation to Britain's sovereignty. So there's historic pics of back in Trump 1, the first Trump term, when there was a state visit. Trump is going to get 2 state visits. Do you think the King, if he gets the opportunity, should say, look, leave Canada alone?
Well, not quite like that, but I do think that he should subtly, diplomatically say something. He is the head of state of Canada, and I know that's a symbolic role, but just to give you a sense of, that symbolic role, I mean, when my dad grew up in Fiji, where also he was the head of state, they used to sing the national anthem, or the Queen was the head of state, they used to sing the national anthem, like the royal family meant something to them. And yes, they won't do that in Canada anymore, but they visit. They're still symbolic, that head of state. I looked this up, I did some research. One of the things he represents is the legitimacy of that state. Trump is directly questioning that. And I think if you're Canadian sitting there thinking, well, you're my head of state, if you're not going to even subtly say something in the background, then what is the point of having you as our head of state? And I would say, I know that people say, and I agree that, that sort of outward political action by the royal family is not a good idea, but a second state visit is political. I mean, that's what's happening here. It's like, the UK trying to get in good books with Trump, and they know that he respects the royal family, so they're using that. So I do think that there is a case here to quietly, diplomatically say something about the sovereignty of a nation that he represents.
Well, it's really splitting countries how you deal with Trump. Do you confront him, or do you just try not to annoy him? And a very good example, just a small little story I saw yesterday, was to do with New Zealand. So you're going to see here the most senior envoy to the UK, Phil Goff, New Zealander, and he stood up and asked this question.
President Trump has restored the bust of Churchill to the Oval Office, but do you think he really understands history?
As a result of that question, the New Zealand government has fired him because they said the question is an insult to Trump. On the other hand, you've got Trudeau. We're going to see Trudeau in a second. So this is obviously the Prime Minister of Canada, who has decided to be really muscular in dealing with Trump. And he was asked a question. His finance minister said the whole thing is crazy, it's out of control, it's a psychodrama. Have a look at this exchange.
Your foreign affairs minister yesterday called all of this a psychodrama. How do you characterize it?
Thursday.
It's such a great answer by Trudeau that it's as if he's dealing with just a torrent of madness. As they say, being Canadian is like living in an apartment above a meth lab at the moment. So how do you deal with him?
Well, I don't think you stand up to him in the way that is being asked. It depends on how you mean stand up to him.
If you do the New Zealand thing, would you? Anyone speaks out.
No, because that doesn't work. Well, you have to, unfortunately, with
comply.
Trump. That's the way you deal with Trump. Different world leaders, you have different strategies in order to deal with them. That was unfortunately, although I don't think the quip was that bad, unfortunately, in order to deal with Trump, that's what you have to do. Now, if you're saying, should the King stand up to Trump publicly? No, that's not the job of the King. That would be a political decision. That is not something that the King should do. But also, it wouldn't work.
But soft power is not, not public, but as Faiza's saying, it's about over dinner, just, saying, I'd be a lot happier if you didn't mention Canada.
That's not King Charles's
He'll take that
job.
badly.
King Charles's job is the soft diplomacy.
Look at this. This is amazing. We've never seen anything like this, where they end up in a shouting. What do you think when you saw the shouting match, Faiza?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, my jaw dropped. No, I mean, it's really upsetting.
You don't have the cards. You don't have the cards.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Cards.
Right now, you don't have
it's agony.
But that is a precise example of how you don't deal with Donald Trump. And it's not fair, but it is the perfect example. Whereas Keir Starmer, love or loathe him, knew exactly what buttons to push in order to make some sort of progress.
What's the level between, okay, yes, you need to be, you might want to be diplomatic and Trump is a very tricky character. But when do you stray into appeasement, right? When do you start actually being like his puppet and going along with him? Because that is important to have that line. And I totally understand it's very tricky, but I do think there's a way in which not Prince anymore, King Charles can nod to the fact that he also represents Canada, that he respects its sovereignty.
Not his job.
It's about the way
really.
he visits it.
Really.
Well, then if you're sitting in Canada though, and you're thinking, well, what's the point of having this head of state that can't even?
It's His Majesty's government. That is the job of His Majesty's government to do that. The King does all the pomp, ceremony, soft diplomacy, all the buttering up required, which is what Starmer did with the letter inviting him. Then Starmer hits him after he's all buttered up in order to get the progress made. And that's how you deal with Donald Trump.
I can buy that. Do call us on this, whether or not the King has a role to push back on Canada's behalf, because Canada is feeling put upon. I gather Canadians now have got an app which you point to anything you buy on the shelf of the supermarket and it tells you the provenance and it tells you if it's been anywhere near the United States, in which case they don't buy it. So that they're already, each of them emotionally involved in a trade war with their nearest neighbour. It's so weird. Elizabeth in Edinburgh, do you think the King has a role to protect Canada?
Yes, good morning, Jeremy and the panel.
Morning.
My cousin has been over this weekend from Canada visiting. He's 79, she's 83, and I don't talk about the King very much, and I don't speak about the King very much. But I was absolutely astounded at how let down they both feel that the King has not stood up and said, this is not going to be the 51st state, this is my Commonwealth, these are my peoples, and you have no right to interfere with them.
Well, he's going to try. Cristo's thought is, as soon as you confront Trump, Trump goes ballistic because he's only got one setting, right? He's not like a tactical nuclear strike. He just blows up the world. So the only way of doing it is you've just got to befriend him and hope he likes you enough not to do something bad.
Yes, that is the only way that you can.
It's crazy, but there it is.
To him. Everybody's got to be sycophantic to him and bow to him, but it isn't being made obvious that the King is doing anything for Canada.
No, I hear you.
He's done a state visit. He's invited him for a state visit.
That looks worse.
Is doing something.
Yeah,
and
but
all
it's
these
true.
people.
It's inviting someone that's literally questioning the legitimacy of a state.
Go back at 90 years to Chamberlain.
I can't take both of you.
Listen, our default setting, we understand this, diplomacy over the years, your default setting is sit down and talk.
Yes.
And then at some point it goes wrong. And it went wrong 90 years ago with Chamberlain, who sat down with Hitler, said, that's fine, we'll go with it. And the result was a total disaster. Now, at some point, surely we have to put a flare in the air. I'm not comparing Hitler and Trump, but where our interests are concerned, we have to say there is a line.
Trump isn't talking about invading Canada. He's making ridiculous statements. If you took every single statement that Trump made seriously, you would do nothing but try and put out fires. You have to have a strategy in order to deal with him, and it's being smart. It's not appeasing him.
Okay. Well, maybe Starmer's the right guy for the job because Starmer clearly doesn't. He's not got much of an ego, it seems to me. So he's sort of not trying to show off. Do not show off in Trump's presence.
Out of that. But I mean, I was talking to a Labour MP on TV that day who said, "Oh, we're going to get a backstop for Ukraine," and we didn't. So I'm not saying that you want to go in all guns blazing, but I think the argument here is that King Charles is their head of state. Now, he's our head of state. I know that's different. He lives here as a different relationship. But still, wouldn't you expect your head of state to say something that's like, I'm really proud to be the head of state of Canada?
Maybe it'll happen over the gratin dauphinoise when they have dinner. Dave is in Kent. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Could we send the King in to say something now?
I think the King should have something to say about it. But the other thing is, if we allow Trump to take over Canada and he's talking about Greenland,
Panama Canal,
that puts him in the same category as Putin. He just thinks he can take over what country he wants, when he wants, how he wants. I mean, when does it stop if you want to take over England?
Well, listen, we've already taken off the table any comparisons with leaders 90 years ago, but this is so crazy that yesterday the Vice President, J.D. Vance, was asked by a reporter, are you considering sending the army into Mexico? And he had to say no. But, it doesn't sound wild, this stuff now. That's where it's got us to. I don't think he's going to invade Greenland, and I think he's teasing Canada for reasons I don't fully understand. I don't think he likes Trudeau, but I don't know why.
Well, again, there might be some just historic bad blood. Or
there's
like Canada.
So based on that logic,
but it's not his personal grudge.
But based on that logic, the grudge with Zelensky is potentially causing the problems with his support of Ukraine. The grudge with Trudeau is causing this issue with Canada. Why would we want to then have a grudge with him by trying to publicly humiliate him?
Good point.
By doing that, we have to be smarter.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between public humiliation and we've got a king who's been, waiting to be king for a long time. There is diplomacy that can be used in subtle ways.
That I agree with. Diplomacy, agree with. Butter him up, and remember, give him the pomp and ceremony, and then he will be a pussycat.
But pomp and ceremony is the red carpet's been rolled out. It's different to just a discussion. I mean, it's a celebration.
You sort of think the way the US is doing it with Ukraine is they say, give us your rare earth and we'll defend you. Maybe we should say, stop talking about Canada and then you can have the red carpet. So we switch it around. We're going to give him the red carpet before he's done what we would like him to do. How much power do we have anyway? Leon in South Yorkshire. Hi, Leon.
Hi there. How's it going?
It's going well. We're just trying to understand the new world. Everything's changed now, hasn't it?
Yeah, everything's changed. Seems to be over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so Russia and America are now allies. That's the key thing in this world. And Trump...
I don't know about that one.
You don't know
about that one, actually.
What's he done against Russia's interests in the last 43 days?
Well, he's obviously got to play the game a little bit with him.
No, I'm talking about Trump here.
He's the only person in this world. Yeah, Trump. He's the only person in this world who's going to settle anything with Putin at the moment. I mean, let's be honest. He's the head of state, the most powerful military in the world. He's he's the only person who's going to be able to sit there and provide the brutemanship that's needed. However, dragging his allies under the table to do that is an absolute shocker. I've had family that served in the forces, been in Afghanistan and Iraq, and, well, what was the point?
I know. We talked yesterday, you might have seen about this thing of us being described, it seems to have been us, a random country that hadn't been to war for 30, 40 years. But come on, on today's topic, do you believe the king can say something to Trump to leave Canada alone?
I don't think he's going to be able to tell him to leave him alone, but he should be saying something at least, and he hasn't said anything. He's kind of just sat in the background, and it's not good enough. He needs to be saying something.
I'll tell you what I think would happen.
Be standing up for British interests.
The king will say to Trump, I'd rather you didn't talk about Canada too much because it's one of my countries. Trump will say, come on, I was just joking. I'm just fooling around. Because that's the most disarming thing, isn't it? It's a joke. They can't take a joke, And then everyone laughs and forgets about it. Because a lot of this may just be the level of a joke. Calling Trudeau the governor, saying, they'll be much better off as a state.
I think we do have to take Trump seriously. I mean, all the things that he said he was going to do, he's been getting on with. He seems very serious about Greenland.
He does seem serious about Greenland.
He does. And I do think it's weird to pick a fight with Canada. They're literally next door and they have, they're both rich countries. It's a bit different with Mexico, although you shouldn't be picking fights with them either. But I think we should take this seriously. And again, it's not just British interest, it's Canadian interests. King Charles is the head of state for Canada as well. And so he has a role there. And I don't think we should forget that. And genuinely, and I know a lot of countries around the world have taken him off as their head of state, that countries will look at this and think, well, what's the point?
OK, Terence is in Lancashire. Hi, Terence.
Hi, boss. How you doing?
You're the boss. What do you want to say?
Well, what should the king do to Donald Trump about Canada? There's nothing he can do about it.
Well, just tell him to shut up about it.
Well, a third of the Canadians don't want him anyway because they speak French.
So don't want the king?
No, because they speak French.
But we were hearing from our brilliant Edinburgh viewer earlier that the Canadians feel let down that the King hasn't lifted a finger.
Well, what should he do? He's head of state. He's not a politician.
Well, that's what we're saying. You don't think he could do anything?
Well, he can't do anything.
Right. But he's king, though. I thought kings could do everything.
And if he did do anything, Terence, and you're spot on, there would be mass hysteria that suddenly the king is now involved in politics. And the very same arguments would be used to get rid of the king as head of state.
I have a feeling the clincher for Cristo here may be, we should have asked this at the start, what would our dear departed queen have done?
She would have schmoozed him. She would have, but she would have also been smart. Remember when she had the Saudi Arabian president over, and then she drove him when women weren't allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia.
But
that is absolutely brilliant.
You're right. Maybe the king could wear some sort of maple leaf.
Or serve maple syrup on the dessert of the state dinner, something like that.
Soft diplomacy through desserts.